everyone, this is Celine from Blue Calla Patterns. In this video we're going to attach the exterior panels to our gusset, and we're going to sew up the side connectors and our handles. So you're going to need your assembled back panel, your assembled front panel, your assembled gusset, and then you're going to need your two side connector pieces, your rectangle ring straps, should be 4 of those, and your handle pieces. So we're going to start with the rectangle ring straps. So on the wrong side, you're going to draw a line through the center. Now, if you're using fabric, this would be interfaced fabric, and you would then press in both halves of the strap in towards that center line, wrong sides together. I'm using cork, so I'm going to do it a little differently. I am going to sew and fold at the same time. So I'm going to fold in each side towards that center line, and I'm going to be sewing here with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from that center line, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side, and then I'm going to repeat the same thing for the remaining 3 pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those up now. Okay, so I've sewn all 4 rectangle ring straps. Now I'm going to slip one through a rectangle ring, and then you want the raw ends to be hidden in the middle. And just put a clip, and I'll do the same for the other 3, and then I'm just going to go over to my machine and I'm going to baste the ends together here. Seam allowance isn't very important, 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, whatever you prefer. Alright, so I'm going to go baste the ends. Okay, so I basted the ends of my rectangle ring straps. Now I'm going to take one of my handle pieces, and on the wrong side, in the center, I'm going to draw a line. And you have to do that along the entire length. Okay, and then you're going to need 2 of these rectangle ring straps, and you're going to pass 2 of them. Oops. 2 of them for each handle. Okay, so once you have 2 of the rectangle rings on the handle, you'll want to bring the 2 shorter ends together, and those should be right sides together. You're going to want to sew them together here with 1/4 inch seam allowance, and make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so I sewed the ends together, and then I opened up my seam allowance and I top stitched along both sides. Now we're going to do the same thing that we did for when we sewed these rectangle ring straps, and we're going to fold in each half of the strap, wrong sides together, and we're going to sew it in place with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the center line. And you're going to do that all the way around the loop, and then you're going to do the same thing for the second side. Make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Now when you're done sewing both halves in towards the center, you're going to end up with a loop and 2 rectangle rings. So what you're going to do is move the rings so they are at opposite ends of the loop, and then you flatten the loop. And you want to make sure that those raw edges are hidden in between the layers. And then just clip the loop together. Okay, and then I'm going to sew the loop, and you're going to be sewing a giant rectangle box. So you're going to sew across underneath one ring all along the entire length with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then stop and rotate and sew underneath the opposite rectangle ring, and then all along the length again with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then you'll end in back stitch. Now I have one handle assembled. If you want to add a rivet to your handles, I would do that right now. I like to add one just above the rectangle ring, the stitching here, just above, right in the center. Now I'm going to go ahead and do exactly the same steps I've just done to make my second handle. Okay, so both handles are ready, and I have added some rivets. I'm going to set them aside for just a tiny bit. And now you're going to take your gusset, and at each end, you are going to make a line 1 1/4 inches below the edge. So these are the shorter ends of the gusset. And 1 1/4 inch below in the center, you're going to make a line. So right here. Okay, and you're going to do the same on the other side. Okay, then you're going to take your D-ring connectors, and again, you're going to draw a line on the wrong side down the center. And you're going to repeat the same thing that you did for your rectangle ring straps. And you're going to fold in towards that center line and sew in place with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the center line. And so you're going to go ahead and you're going to do that with both pieces. Okay, so I have both D-ring connector strap pieces sewn. You're going to pass one of the connector strap pieces through a D-ring. And then you have the raw edges inside, and you fold it so that the raw ends meet, and this will be the wrong side of your connector where the raw ends are. So this will be the front, this will be the back, and you're going to add a little strip of double-sided tape to the wrong side, just to hold it in place for sewing. Then you're going to take your gusset and peel away the backing. This is stubborn backing. You cannot get it to come off. There we go. Peel the backing, and then the mark that we made 1¼ inches down, that's where we're going to put the top edge of our D-ring connector. Okay, and make sure that it's centered. You should have put your mark in the center, but if you didn't, you want to make sure that that D-ring connector is centered. Now I'm going to go over to my machine. I'm going to sew this in place, and you're going to sew underneath, and then you're going to rotate and go down one side, and then the bottom edge, and then again up this side, and then back stitch. And keep your needle in the down position when you're rotating to make it easier to turn. And keep 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the edges. Okay, so I just finished sewing on the one D-ring connector, and I also decided to add a rivet. Now I'm going to do exactly the same steps to attach the second D-ring connector. And then we're going to be able to start attaching the front and the back to the gusset. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the second D-ring connector, and then we will do the final assembly of the exterior. Okay, so we're now ready to start attaching our exterior panels to our gusset. I know that I had mentioned probably in the first video about removing some of the foam at the corners, and I realized I did not do it for the panel that I just assembled, so I am going to do that now because it definitely gets a little bit bulky at these corners. I'm just going to remove some of my basting stitches so that I can trim this a little bit. Going to do it on the other corner as well. Okay, now we are going to, okay, so I see I don't have I have the center here with the seam, but if it's easier, you can also mark this on the wrong side here. I don't know why, but my pen refuses to work today. There we go. Okay, so let's start with the back panel. So you start by lining the bottom center mark with the center of the gusset and clip it together. And then the second thing I do is I clip the top corners together. And then I'm going to clip everything else. Okay, so now I'm going to clip the rest. I usually start from the center or the top, and then I work my way to the corner. Now sometimes these corners can be a little bit difficult to ease in. I find not so much the exteriors, but the linings. So when we're doing that part, I can show you a little trick to make it a bit easier. But it looks like these are coming together pretty easily. Okay, so now I'm going to sew these together. You start at one of the top corners, you back stitch, and then you work all the way around, and then when you get to the other corner, you back stitch again. Okay, so the first panel is attached. Now we're going to do the same thing with the front panel. And we're basically doing the same thing that we just did. You pin the center, bottom centers first, and then the top corners, and then everything else in between. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Now I have both front and back panels sewn to the gusset. I'm going to trim the seam allowance, and then I'm going to turn the bag right side out. I know it's a little bit boring to watch me do this. You can fast forward if you like. Okay, gonna get rid of this. And then we're going to turn the bag inside out. Okay. All right. Because I used cork, I can't really press my seams, so I like to roll them. Sometimes I think I showed this in my Astor video series maybe. Where I had used cork again, and I wanted the seams to sit nicely, so I cut scrap pieces of Peltex and I wrapped the seam, and then I used those giant alligator clips, and then it sort of gets the seams to sit very nicely. Okay, so here's the exterior of our bag. So now all we're going to do for now with the handles is we're going to base them to the top edge of our bag. And so I want to make a mark. So you're going to measure from the corner seam here, and you're going to measure 2 inches in and just make a very faint mark at the top here. Do the same on this side. Okay, and then take one of your handles, and because so you should have one side that shows the seam from where you joined the strap piece, so you want that to be facing up, because once your bag is done and you've turned it right side out, it will be hidden underneath. So you also want to have about 1/2 inch of your strap pieces sticking up above the top edge of the bag. I don't like it when there's just when the strap pieces meet the top edge. I like it when there's enough of the strap to be caught in the top stitching, the final top stitching for the bag in the very last step. Okay, so there's my 2-inch mark. So you have a space of 2 inches from the side seams to where your rectangle ring strap starts. Okay, and then I'm just going to go over to my machine and I'm going to baste this in place. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing, and I'm going to baste the second handle to this side of the bag. That's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to start our lining assembly.